Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Managed to Retain with my friends Sherry and Lou. Sherry and Lou, how are you all doing today?
Fantastic, Vinay.
Sherry and Lou, something that I was thinking about the other day, and I'm going to talk about myself here. I've had hard conversations with employees, bosses, managers, customers in the past, my kids. And I don't look forward to it. I don't get up in the morning and say, I can't wait to have 10 hard conversations today. I don't know if there's a lot of people who do wake up like that. But it has to happen sometimes. It has to happen in the sense that there's I want to be careful in how I choose my words here. There are conversations where there's greater alignment that needs to occur.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a hard conversation. And that's something I'd like to focus on today, about what could be called a hard conversation and maybe how we can shift that. Is that a fair topic for us to discuss today?
I think it's great. It's a topic that a lot of us don't want to discuss because we consider ourselves weak if we admit that we have difficulty with these types of things. So I think this is great.
So I'm going to start talking about myself first. And let me tell you kind of about some of the things that go through my mind, or I'll say in my gut when this is happening. I have an employee who's working for me. Let's just pick the employee right now, because that's who we see most and talk to probably most often, the people in our office or our organization. And they're not performing well. And, they've been performing. And then all of a sudden I see something that says they either made a mistake, or I see some metric or something that I measured, some sign or symbol that says, this is not right. And I immediately go to the negative. I mean, I will tell you that happens to me a lot, where I go, gosh. And I've put it off for a little while too. There's probably a little bit of guilt on my side, because I may have had this conversation 6 weeks ago, maybe even 6 months ago. I've just been kicking the can down the road. And what makes it hard is the fact that I need this correct. At least that's what I feel. I need, or I want this correct to happen. Tell me a little bit about why that happens. I mean, you guys talk to folks in the leadership space as coaches for leaders. Why does that happen?
Well,
we're human, right?
We are. It's the humanness about us.
Yeah.
And as humans, we're emotional beings. Now, no matter how much we try to convince ourselves that we're naturally rational, we're not. Doesn't matter what your background is. The science of being a human is that we're not rational by nature. We are emotional by nature. And so initially, we always approach things and think things on an emotional level. And when we do it that way, that's why we feel the way we do. As you're talking, right? A lot of the things you're saying is, well, why do we feel this way? Why do we feel hesitant in approaching difficult conversations? Or on the opposite, why do we feel that we need to have these conversations of confrontation? Or why is it daunting, but we know we need to do it? So right off, number one, we're emotional beings. We're not logical. It takes a little work. That's number one. So
what I'm hearing from you is, and there's a lot of science around this, is look, from the brain, the first thing that it goes through is through the amygdala. And I think the amygdala has been under fair or unfair scrutiny in the last number of years, in the sense that that's where the whole flight or fight response comes from. How do you emotionally feel about something? If the amygdala sees that you're scared, the first thing is it hijacks the brain. You can't think properly anymore. It just blocks all rational centers off. And it says, get the hell out of Dodge. And you start running, or you put your fists up and you start fighting.
Right.
And that's it. That's just purely an emotional response. You haven't even had a chance to think. And I think that's what I just heard from you.
That's right. And running could be, I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to let you deal with that. And vice versa. So, yeah.
So let's talk about this in the situation. So I've got this employee. They haven't done well. I've been sitting on it potentially. Maybe it may have been a day. It may have been a number of weeks or months, maybe years. That's just been festering for a little while. There's this emotional response that I have to it. I really don't want to have this hard conversation. Honestly, I got so many other things that I've got to do today. So it just kind of keeps floating to number 7 on my list. I only get 6 done. I'd like to, of course, pause for a second, because I think this is the topic we want to talk about, but I want everyone to know a little bit more about who you all are and what you all do. So Sherry, Luke, can you all tell everyone a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. Thanks,
Yeah.
Renai.
Yeah, thanks for that opportunity. Sure. So for those of you that do not know us, we are Sherry and Lou with the Lou Ever Group, and we are business and executive leadership coaches and corporate trainers. And we love helping our clients get from where they are to where they intend to be by then becoming more aware, of their stuckness and utilizing of our systematic approach that we have. So we love transforming today's leaders, and this is a wonderful topic for all of us.
Fits right in.
Fits right in.
Yeah.
And I want to come back and visit some of those principles, because I think there's those 10 principles, there's probably at least one or two that I think we think apply very nicely here. And I'll talk about myself real quick. My name is Vinay Raman. I am the CEO of Carmo. We're a data visualization analytics company. We help companies increase their retention and recruiting, their productivity and their profitability, and it's all data driven. And the reason for our conversation is because these data analytics and visuals can actually help you understand what's happening with your people. And once you understand with your people, that's where Sherry and Lou come in. They can help you understand, what are you going to do with it now? Now, how do you take action on that? So I think there was two principles that I heard. There's the reflecting principle and the nurture principle. Can you tell them a little bit about what the nurture and reflecting principle are all about here?
Yeah, I mean, even off the top, we look at even the word nurture, we kind of understand what that is, right? But the nurture principle, we always preface that by, we want to feed and water the plants. And the reason I say the plants is because anything that, if you've ever worked with a plant, in order for it to grow, you've got to feed and water it. You've got to have a process. And every plant and every whatever you want to a type of plant may require different type of treatment. And so we got to look at that as people. And so if we were to stop feeding and watering plants, just like we do people, what happens? Well, they begin to slowly wither away, and even plants, they die. With employees, they leave or they stop performing. And so we need to look at it from that perspective. And it's really never too late to begin nurturing people. And so it's important for us to know that as leaders, we need to observe this very closely. And if we observe the withering, and that's what the data can show us, where is that withering happening, so that we can then put something into action to be consistent. And not necessarily blame anything specific or any person specifically, but take the responsibility as a leader and find out, what do we need to do to provide the necessary nurturing for that person or that team to ensure the growth of what it is that they're expecting to do. So that's the nurture principle. And of course, the equipping is just providing them the necessary means to do their role well, not just as their position, but also as a person.
So kind of coming back to why we do this session is because you all have these 10 principles that we can ascribe to as leaders, as managers, supervisors in an organization. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you what I do, which is visualize data and help you analyze it. And the reason we're going to do this is because I want to give you an example of an employee who is not at the top of the stack, not at the bottom of the stack, somewhere right in the middle. We're going to take a look at this. I'll orient you to this graph real quick so you can kind of see how we make this look for you. And that's what I want to spend the rest of our time talking about, is how can we start to lean in with this reflecting principle, the equipping principle, and this nurture principle, and how we can turn that from a conversation that is something that ties my gut up in knots to something that both sides are smiling at the end of the conversation. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, give me a quick second here. Let me share my screen. And can you all see what I have on screen here?
Sure can.
All right, so on the screen here, I have a data, a series of data that's been given to us and that we've put it out as a visualization. And what we're going to do is take you through the process of analyzing it. So we're looking at Sally here. And just think about it like this. So there's this circle here. And each one of these things are KPIs. And really, it doesn't matter what the KPIs. It could be a KPI for a landscaping company, a pest control company. It could be for a technology company. It could be for a bank. That doesn't matter, because all of us have KPIs, key performance indicators, or metrics, ways that we measure how our employees or people are doing. You put any of those around the outside, The best case scenario is where that little blue area, which shows how Sally's doing, how well Sally's doing against that. If the blue extended and the whole thing was a big blue circle, that meant she was knocking a home run, a grand slam in every one of those categories. Fact of the matter is, it's highly unlikely that any employee is always doing fantastic in every single dimension. There's some places where they need support, some places where they may not need so much support. So if you look at this, you can start to look at this callback score. This number of times she's got to go back to those same customers and do a service or do a job for that customer again. And you can start to see, as you get closer and closer to the center, something like this safe driving score, this customer satisfaction score, this idle time, how much they sit in their vehicle just with the engine running, getting 0 miles to a gallon. Those are some of the areas where there's some more need for support. There's some room for improvement here. So overall, Sally's not a bad employee or a good employee, kind of goodish, maybe badish. And what we do here is we kind of show you each one of those categories, what the actual score is for each one of those categories, and then her overall score. So she's a 62 out of 100. That's actually not too bad, generally speaking. Now, what I want to do is talk about this idea of, all right, customer satisfaction, not so good as far as what the rest of the company is doing. Could be a lot better there, right? Her safe driving score, not so good relative to the way she's performing in other areas. So now I've got this little thing in my gut and it's starting to get knotted up. And I've got to have a conversation with her, Sally, about safe driving and customer satisfaction. Sherry or Lou, how would you approach this now that you can see this on this graph? It gives us a tool to be able to start to say, all right, I can see this now. I can do something about it. But that's when I start falling into this emotional, I don't have a hard conversation with Sally. I actually like Sally, right? How do you approach this?
Yeah, it's not something you learn in school, is it?
No, it's not.
How to become an effective leader and having these kind of conversations. Yeah.
Well, we definitely we're talking about the sandwich method before, we wanted to at least lead in with the strengths, but we also don't, as leaders, especially new leaders, we have a tendency to go right to the negative, right? Like, boom, right there, what's going on? But then we forget where all the other strengths are, and we can't forget that. So I know, Vinay, you were talking about earlier about, the sandwich, and you lead in with something that's great. Then we have a little bit going, well, what about this opportunity here? And then lead in with some actions at the very end. So make sure it's a win-win situation. We're not feeling on both sides that, feeling any type of negative feelings, any resentment, because that can just snowball. And we don't want that, because again, it goes back to emotional creatures. We are just emotional for that. So we have to be mindful on that piece anyway.
And there's two different ways you can go about having conversations with people, particularly employees that you're needing to have these difficult or challenging conversations that we might consider challenging or difficult. But just to kind of right off the top, let's look at it from a different perspective. Does it really have to be considered a difficult conversation? No, it doesn't really have to be. It's our perception. If we're approaching it as a difficult or challenging conversation, that's what it's going to be.
And it's always going to be bumped down to the last thing on your list, right?
You're going to move it.
Yeah.
So you've got an approach, right? Are we going to approach it as a difficult conversation? Or are we going to approach it as there's this person that I can help, and I've got to identify, first of all, where they are, how they think. Because again, if we understand that we're emotional beings and we need to approach it from that perspective, regardless if we like to or not. I've heard this before. Well, Lou, I'm just not an emotional person. I don't like approaching it with emotion. If you work with people, we need to understand that that's how people approach it. So even if you may not want to approach it that way, they do. And so it's about them. It's not about us as a leader. So that is the direction that we most likely perhaps want to go, meeting people where they are. What's Sally's perspective? How is she approaching the world? What is her framework? If we can identify what that framework is and how that kind of bubbles around where we want her to be, now we know how to approach Sally. Now we know how to approach that position. But if we don't know that framework, we're not going to know how to approach that position. We're going to approach it our way without knowing the framework that she's approaching her job and how she does things.
And I think what I'm hearing a little bit of here, and maybe kind of to show some evidence here, and Sherry, I think you touched on this as well, right? Look, in this revenue per hour and these planned stops, this callback score, Sally's actually doing quite well here, right? And just leaning in with, I mean, I'm trying to think of an analogy here. If someone is at a parking lot, I'm just going out shopping somewhere, and someone yells at me with an angry face and yells, "Hey, you!" Right? My immediate response is going to be, "What does this person want?" Right? And I don't even know. There's no context to the situation. Person just yells out. Now, if someone says, "Excuse me," right? Kind of just an opening the conversation. I kind of turn around. They probably need some help. And so we've already just shifted this conversation in terms of difficult conversation versus, hey, we need to create some more clarity. And I think this is part of what I'm hearing from you, although, and it's that word. We can go to her and say, "Yo, look, your callback scores, your revenue per hour, your planned stops are all looking pretty fantastic, Sally. Did you know that?" Actually, yeah, I kind of feel pretty confident about that. Thank you, boss. There's a couple of places I'd love to make you look better. Is that interesting to you? And just kind of, I mean, it's almost like a mic drop moment there, right? you leave it. And I bet you Sally's probably going to lean in and say, "Yeah, I mean, what are you seeing? How can I help?" Right? Is that
because now you're on her side. Even though as a leader, we're on her side, perhaps by default, but how does she know that? And I love that approach. Again, it's about that. And we had mentioned pre talking about this live is what I call the inside out method. It's in existence in a lot of different communication styles. Is the inside out method, meaning let's start from the inside of the person and work our way out to where we need them to be. And we have to start with the person first. And what does that mean? Well, emotional beings, let's start there. We were just talking about this earlier, even about communicating via email.
Yeah.
A lot of us as leaders have a difficult time on how we communicate via email. In other words, how people perceive what we communicate via email sometimes can be misconstrued, right? And so, but how do we begin that? We begin with the person. You'll notice that for Sherry and I, we intentionally, and hopefully everyone else can take this as a small tip, no matter who you're responding to, no matter what you're responding to, or why you're emailing them, even if it's a difficult conversation, we always approach the person first. How are you? Hope you had a great weekend, or hope you had a great day on a Monday. Happy Wednesday, happy Tuesday. It's very easy to meet the person where they are first. We're at common ground. And then we begin to lead into bringing them into the outside where we are, inside, out.
So I'm going to stop sharing here. And if anybody would like that graphic or image, feel free to mention in the comments, say a graph, or type in Sally, actually, and I'll send you the graph of Sally so you can take a look at it. But I like that idea. This is not this idea that you have to make things all warm and fuzzy, squishy, and everybody has to sing Kumbaya all the time. I don't think it has anything to do with that actually at all. It has more to do with the idea that if you want someone to reach a destination that is also in your best interest, why don't you invite them into that destination as opposed to push them? Because it's hard to push a wet noodle.
Yeah.
Rather, if they're pulling you in that direction, that's a fantastic thing. I think as a leader, I would rather change it from it being a hard conversation to a place where they say, "Yeah, you don't need to tell me anymore. I got it. I'm going there by myself."
Yeah.
It's
Sometimes we just need a starting point. Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's a matter of that. It's anything. You get a phone call from a friend who's driving to meet you that's never been in your area. And they're like, "I have no idea where I'm at. Can you help me?" And what are you going to do? You're going to provide them instructions from where they are.
Yeah.
To come to you. And we've got to do the same thing with people. They don't have to be, super, Pollyanna positive. It's not about that. It's about the result. If you're results driven, which we all should be in some way, and who's going to drive those results? Well, the people that we lead, we rely upon them. to drive those results. Numbers don't drive your results. The people drive the numbers that show you results. That's where we have to understand that. Without people, we have no one to lead. So what are we going to do? Approach the person from the inside, draw them to where you are and where the outcome looks. It's all about approach.
And I want to piggyback off of that too. I think the commonality in all of this is that they're human and then we're people first. We got to remember that, we're not machines as much as we would like to think that we can just reproduce and, hey, here's this top selling person doing fantastic and let's duplicate you. We need more of you. Right. And that's such an old school mentality. I mean, we all live through it. I mean, he and I both have experience on that. Like, we need more of you, and they're like, that's great. But everybody has different strengths. So let's look at the human, let's look at the person. And again, being where they're at and then work from there and build upon it. So I think that's a key thing. If anything, out of this conversation is think about one, where they are and where they're at, and then look at them as the person.
And approach it that way.
And
so you can learn how to program a robot.
Yeah.
Work with the person,
which I know it's coming. I know, but
even then,
we're still human.
I will buy my services from a person. I don't think that'll ever go away. And so let's work with that. Let's not look at people as the robotics that's necessary to hit a number. Let's look at the person as someone we can develop from where they are to help us accomplish the overall objective.
I think there's one last thing I'd like to say, and that is this idea of and versus or. A lot of people think that you have to have the hard conversation or you're too soft on them.
Right.
I think it's time to start thinking of it at a higher level. Both of them together. You can be good to the person and get the results that you want.
That's right.
At the same time.
That's exactly right. You can have accountability without being a dictator about it. The approach makes a difference. People will want to accomplish what you want them to if you approach them the right way. And you can still be direct.
And the word that keeps coming to mind is this idea of clarity. It's all about this idea of, if you approach it from a point of view of you're trying to correct them, you're kind of beating down on the wrong door. If you approach it from a place of creating clarity for them so that they can get there, it's the same exact conversation with just a different set of lenses. And it's inviting them to a better place, as opposed to saying, I'm going to beat you until you get to that place.
It's true. I like it. Love
the
it.
Second one is the hard conversation.
That's right. Yep. It doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah.
Just like it doesn't have to be lonely at the top. Only
That's
if you're doing it wrong.
That's right. Well, if anybody wants to get in touch with you all and get more of these 10 principles from you and understand more about people like Sally's they may have in their organization, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely reach out on our website, www.loueverettgroup.com. We're also on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. So please reach out. We would love to have a conversation.
Love it.
And actually, Sherry and Lou, I'm just going to spring a little bit of a surprise here. I'm actually launching a free calculator. If you'd like to see some analytics just like you saw with Sally, you can actually put your own data in there. You don't need me. You'll be able to do it for up to 20 employees across 7 different dimensions. I think you saw 7 or 8 KPIs or metrics that you measure people on. It's a free calculator that you can use. You just simply have to type in Sally, and I'll send the calculator over to you for you to use, and we'll automatically analyze and send it back to you so you can see the same way. Because Sally's just one employee in the company. You can have 19 others. So.
Nice.
But I'm Vinay at Carmo. So www.carmo.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn as well. So last question for you all is, do you feel like we've answered this question about hard conversations? How do you have them?
I think we've started and given some good points here to get started. But any more than that, we can continue on the next time, or give us all a call and we'll sit down and talk.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Sharon and Lou, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Vinay.